Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The steady drip, drip, drip of a leaky faucet in the kitchen was driving me crazy, but I couldn't bring myself to get up and tighten the valve or call a plumber. That slow, maddening rhythm felt like a soundtrack to everything that had become my life. Uneasy, endless, piercing in its own quiet way. As I blinked, focusing on the cracks in the ceiling plaster, I realized how alien this house felt to me now. It used to be home, a place of safety and warmth, and the promise of tomorrow. But not tonight. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and tried to recall how I'd gotten here. The memory came back sharper than I wanted. Yesterday, my son told his teacher he had two dads. One who was cool, and one who buys food. She laughed, a polite, uncertain laugh, maybe because she didn't know what he really meant. Maybe she was just caught off guard. But I didn't laugh. I felt my throat tighten and my spine go rigid. Sitting in that small plastic chair, the kind they put in elementary classrooms for open house nights, I thought I might never breathe properly again. On the way home, he chewed on caramel candies, his favorite. I just kept my eyes on the road, gnawing on the inside of my cheek. Silence hung between us like a thick fog. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But I said nothing. Not then. I dropped him off at the house, told him to start on his homework, and I headed to the nearest store. I bought a new kettle, a weird impulse purchase, one of those old-fashioned, steel-bodied ones that can keep water simmering for half an hour if you leave it on low. I placed it on the stove, turned up the heat, and sat across from it, arms folded, staring. 30 minutes it hissed and groaned, boiling away while I, just as silently, fought back the swirl of my own thoughts. But that kettle had become my symbol. It stood for how I'd let my own anger, suspicion, and frustration build and bubble and steam until everything nearly spilled over. A lifetime of quiet tolerance, all culminating in that low, constant whistling. A warning. I don't even remember how it all started. This gulf between my wife, Sarah, and me. Maybe it was always there, too small to notice until it became a chasm no plank could bridge. She used to greet me at the door when I came home from work. She'd take my coat, kiss my cheek, and ask me about my day. It felt like a life from someone else's story now. I think I first sensed something was really wrong the day I found her phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing with an unknown contact. KP, it said on the screen with a short message. Asterisk, can't wait to see you again. Asterisk, my stomach dropped. Her face, when I showed her the phone, went through about 3 distinct expressions: shock, fear, anger, before she forced a laugh and said, "A work thing. KP is Kevin, from the partner firm. We're setting up a new PR campaign. Don't be silly." I had no immediate proof to contradict her, so I forced a smile and pretended I believed it. The conversation ended with me muttering something about respect and boundaries, and her replying in a calm tone that I was reading too much into a harmless text. It was a quiet, almost polite argument, the kind that leaves you more uneasy than if you just yelled at each other. That night, in bed, I stared at the ceiling just like I was doing now, wondering if a single text could be the beginning of the end. It was, and I think I knew it even then. The next day at work, I tried to bury myself in spreadsheets, phone calls, anything to distract me. I'm a financial analyst by trade, so numbers are my shield. You can't read heartbreak in a column of quarterly projections, right? But I couldn't focus worth a damn. Every time my phone buzzed, I snatched it up, half expecting to see some message from Sarah that would confirm my fears or put them to rest. Nothing. Just pointless work notifications. I remember driving home that evening, heavy in the chest, and seeing her car absent from the driveway. It was nearly 9 when she finally pulled up. Told me she'd been shopping. Flashed a small gift bag at me as proof. A new dress, allegedly on sale. I nodded. Maybe I forced a joke about how late these discount stores were open. She didn't laugh. That was our new script, forced civility. Time passed in a haze of tension and forced smiles. I felt her slipping away. Sometimes I told myself I was imagining it, that couples go through rough patches. We'd weather it somehow. But other nights, the ache in my gut told me to wake the hell up. Something was definitely off, and that hunch hardened into certainty one weekend when she said she was visiting her sister. I found out later she never went there at all. But the final blow, my full, painful awakening, came not from her, but from my little boy. "Daddy," he said, hugging my leg in that clingy, adorable way kids do. Ms. Sanders asked me to talk about our family. I said I have 2 dads. But is that true? He looked up at me with such an innocent expression, as though he was asking if tomorrow was Saturday. And that's when I realized how real it all was. My own child had internalized the presence of some other father figure in his life. Enough to casually mention it in a room full of classmates and one startled teacher. I listened to his words, feeling my insides twist into something small and pained. I must have stiffened, because he let go of my leg and started fidgeting with a candy wrapper. For a moment, I couldn't form any coherent response. Finally, I forced a little smile and said, "No, buddy, you only have one dad." But, sometimes people get confused. It was an awful attempt at reassurance, and I could see in his little face he didn't fully believe me. He walked ahead, sugar crinkling in his cheek, humming some tune from a TV show. I stared at his small back, shoulders in a bright backpack, while my own heart hammered. My thoughts raced. Asterisk, who else has been around him so much that he thinks of them as a second dad? Asterisk, the answer was obvious, but it made me nauseous. He said it again, later, in front of Miss Sanders and half a dozen parents. She laughed. I did not. Because that was the moment I realized how far from me she'd gone, how entwined with another man's presence she was, enough that our son recognized it, felt it. When I got home that evening, I didn't rage. I didn't throw accusations at Sarah. Instead, I quietly set that new kettle on the stove, turned it on, listened to its low rumble, the rising hiss of water under pressure. It was a symphony of suppressed anger, betrayal, heartbreak. I pictured her. I pictured him. I forced those images out of my mind, but they kept coming back, uninvited, like a vile slideshow. I think I was scared to confront her, because confrontation would mean it was real. If I kept quiet, maybe, just maybe, it was all in my head. Maybe my son misunderstood something. Maybe I was just paranoid. A million maybe illusions I clung to. But illusions are fragile. And all it took to shatter them was me coming home a bit too early one night, an ordinary Tuesday, feeling a bit ill from a stomach bug. I parked on our silent street. The porch light was off, which was odd. Sarah usually left it on for me. My footsteps echoed up the walkway. The living room blinds were partially drawn, but I could see a glow from the TV. Then I saw his silhouette behind those blinds, a broad figure, slightly taller than me. I stood still, heart pounding. Asterisk, maybe it's just an old friend. Asterisk, I told myself. Asterisk, maybe it's that coworker from her PR office. Asterisk, some part of me was still resisting the final truth. I quietly unlocked the door. At first, I heard nothing but soft rustling, maybe the TV playing low. Then, as I stepped in, I heard Sarah's voice, breathy, urgent. In a way she hadn't sounded with me for a long time. My pulse hammered so loudly, I thought it would burst from my chest. In the next instant, I heard his voice, a deeper register, a soft moan that sounded almost triumphant. It felt like a punch in the gut, like every muscle in my body seized up, refusing to let me move forward. But I forced myself to step around the corner, into the living room. My stomach churned. My mouth went dry. I saw them on our couch, his hands running over her thighs, her head thrown back, lips parted, her blouse undone, the flicker of the TV on their skin. I won't detail more. What I saw was enough to kill any illusions I had left. I stood there, silent, cold, unmoving, for maybe 5 seconds, long enough that time seemed to freeze. Then Sarah's eyes snapped open. She saw me. She jerked away from him so fast she nearly fell off the couch. God. Mark. What are you? He turned too, wide-eyed, shirt half unbuttoned, pants undone. I recognized him now. Kevin Parker. One of those flashy, big-shot managers from the tech sector downtown. She'd mentioned him in passing. I'd never thought to suspect that behind that casual mention lay the reason my child was telling people he had 2 dads. I can't properly describe my emotions in that moment. I was so painfully calm on the surface. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. Maybe part of me had already done all that mentally, for weeks on end, in the quiet hours. Instead, I just stared at them, breathing raggedly, and said, "Get out." My voice trembled on the last word, but I forced it out. Out. Sarah was scrambling for her clothes, muttering excuses, please, something. Kevin stared at me with a combination of pity and arrogance, like a man who knows he's broken a code but doesn't regret it. My hands balled into fists, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lash out. My son was asleep upstairs after all. The last thing I wanted was to traumatize him even more. Kevin, that bastard, fixed his pants, grabbed his jacket, and without a word tried to brush past me. I blocked his path, our faces just inches apart. I could smell his cologne, some expensive, overpowering brand. He gave me this slight, almost apologetic nod. Then he was gone, stepping out into the night. Sarah was crying, rummaging for something to cover up with. I glared at her. For a second, I almost felt the hot rush of tears pricking my eyes, but I swallowed them back. Then I turned and left the room. I heard her calling my name, her voice frantic, but I climbed the stairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat on the edge of the tub for what felt like hours. That was the first time. The first time I truly saw it, I mean. The second time, I only heard about it from a neighbor who politely told me, "Your wife is letting some man come around a lot when you're at work." But that neighbor's words barely stung by then. Nothing compared to the memory of them on that couch. The next evening, I took my son to a friend's house, so he wouldn't have to hear the fight that was inevitably coming. When I got back, I looked for Sarah, but she'd left. No note, no message. Eventually, when she did return, we shouted ourselves hoarse. I demanded to know how long it had been going on, how she could do this, what I'd done wrong. She accused me of being distant, of burying myself in numbers, of never asking how she felt. Our voices rose, merged into a cacophony of bitterness and heartbreak. We circled the house from the living room to the kitchen, flinging accusations like knives. Plates rattled in the cupboards. At some point, I felt my throat go raw, and she just cried, sobbed, threw half-sentences at me that I could barely parse. Then, as if a switch flipped, she turned cold. "You never were here for me. Always off in your own world," she spat. "You never see me." I wanted to argue, but I felt hollow. Maybe in some ways, she was right. Maybe I'd let the business of work overshadow my family. But did that justify her betrayal? Did that excuse the heartbreak she inflicted on me, on our child? We ended up in separate rooms. By the time dawn crept in through the blinds, I'd stopped trying to sleep. The next day, I still woke, shaved, put on a suit, and left for the office. But inside, something had changed. A new hollowness had taken root. That's when the memory of my son's words echoed in my head. Asterisk, I have 2 dads. One's cool, the other buys food. Asterisk, that line grated on me like an open wound. So that's how he saw me. The provider, but not the fun one. I drove to the school that afternoon, intending only to pick him up and have a normal father-son evening. But on the drive home, I was so silent again, so wrapped in my own gloom, I'm sure I only confirmed his perception that I was the boring dad who just fed him. That evening, Sarah came home late again. I heard her hush-voiced phone call out on the porch. Probably Kevin, I thought. The kettle on the stove started whistling once more, piercing my eardrums. I didn't break it. I didn't throw it. I let it wail. In a strange way, I felt it was giving voice to everything I refused to scream out loud. A few days after that, I bought a new kettle, a bigger one, the one that could stay hot and raging for half an hour if I let it. That was my therapy in some twisted sense. I'd turn it on, sit across from it, and watch the water bubble violently inside. I'd think about the years of my marriage, the child we had, the promises we made. And I'd let the steam build until it all hissed out. Then came the day I decided I couldn't endure this quietly anymore. The day I decided I deserved more than just the scraps of a broken marriage. I was done swallowing all my anger. I had a plan. Asterisk if Sarah and Kevin wanted to rewrite my life, then let them, but not on my terms. Asterisk I took a day off from work. Drove to Kevin Parker's office, an immaculate building downtown with glass walls that sparkled in the morning sun. Security guards with crisp uniforms checked IDs at the entrance. "I'm here to see Mr. Parker," I said calmly. They gave me a visitor badge. I walked in, gave a polite nod to the receptionist, shook hands with a few people wearing suits and forced smiles. Then I reached the corner office with the big glass windows, and there he was, behind a pristine desk, looking every bit the corporate success story. He froze when he saw me. I can only describe his expression as that of a dog caught stealing food off the table. Shame, surprise, fear, but also a flicker of defiance. "Mark," he said, clearing his throat. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" I placed a single folder on his polished desk. "You earned it." He didn't look at the folder. He just looked at me, jaw tight. I stayed silent, waiting. Finally, he picked it up, flipped through the pages, scanning them. "You're transferring the property into her name?" he asked, sounding genuinely confused. "You're giving away your half of the house." "It's not a threat," I said quietly. "It's a choice. I'm done fighting for something that was taken from me. You want her. You want our life. Fine. Sign where indicated. Let me walk away clean." His eyes flicked up to mine. "Look, man, this was never meant to." "Stop," I cut him off, my voice shaking with anger. I still refused to let burst out. "You did what you did. I'm giving you two the space you wanted. Believe me, that's all that's in there." I took a pen from his desk, tapped it once on the papers. He swallowed, shifted uncomfortably. "Why are you doing this?" I forced a grin that likely looked more like a grimace. "Because I've spent too long letting you and her define my pain. This is me taking control. That's all." He was silent, flipping to the final page. The tension in the room was thicker than any boardroom negotiation he'd ever experienced, I'm sure. People passed in the hallway, glancing curiously at us, but no one dared interrupt. He set the folder down, not signing anything yet. "I'll have to show this to my lawyer," he muttered. "Fine," I said, standing. "I'll be in touch. Don't worry, Kevin. You'll see me again." And with that, I turned on my heel and left. If I stayed longer, I might have done something I'd regret, or turned into a pitiful beggar. I didn't want to do either. As I walked past the guards and back into the crisp Seattle air, I felt a strange sense of clarity, a numbness that felt almost like freedom. When I got home, Sarah was waiting in the living room. She looked pale, eyes ringed with red, as though she'd been crying for hours. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked, voice trembling. "Kevin called me," he said. "I don't understand any of this." I shrugged, walked to the bedroom. She followed, anxiously hovering at the doorway as I opened the closet and started laying out my clothes. Jacket, shirts, a couple pairs of pants. She kept asking questions. "What are you doing? Where are you going? Why won't you talk to me?" I didn't answer. I just kept packing. Carefully folding, tucking items into my old duffel bag. Eventually, I zipped it up, grabbed my phone charger, put it in the side pocket. She stood there, pressing her arms around herself. "Please, Mark, just tell me what this is." Her voice was near a whisper. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I got so lost. I don't know what I was doing." I looked at her, the woman I had loved, the mother of my child, the partner I'd once believed would stand beside me forever. I felt a wave of sadness so profound it nearly buckled my knees. But I'd come too far to crumble now. "You want me to talk?" I said, voice low. "Here it is. I'm done, Sarah. I'm done hearing your excuses, your apologies. I'm done burying my own pain. It's time for me to go." She stepped forward, eyes shining with tears. "What about our son? He needs his father. Mark, you can't just leave him." My chest tightened. She knew exactly where to twist the knife. "I'm not leaving him. I manage. I'll be in touch. He's my boy. But I'm not staying in this house another second." She opened her mouth, maybe to say something about how she regretted everything, how it was just a passing fling. But I didn't let her continue. Enough. I moved toward the door, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. "We'll sort out details, custody, finances. I left you papers in the kitchen drawer. Read them. Or don't. I can't control what you do anymore, Sarah." She tried to block me. I gently moved her aside. The living room felt like a war zone. The memory of that couch scene playing in my head in vivid detail. I could still see the flicker of the TV dancing on their bare skin. I exhaled through clenched teeth, fighting the urge to smash something. Instead, I let that wave of fury pass. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me, the finality of that click echoing in my ears. I expected to feel a surge of relief. Instead, I just felt empty. I got into my car, turned the key. The engine roared to life with mechanical indifference. There was a moment when I glanced back at the house, wondering if I'd see her silhouette in the doorway, if she'd come running after me. She didn't. Or maybe I drove off too fast to notice. Halfway down the street, I stopped at a red light. I realized my hands were shaking. My phone buzzed. My first instinct was to ignore it, but I glanced at the screen. It was a text from her. *, Mark, please don't hate me. *, I locked the phone without replying. There was nothing left to say. When the light turned green, I pressed the gas and felt something shift inside me. All that quiet rage, that heartbreak, had transformed into a kind of cold, focused determination. This wasn't me punishing her anymore. This was me freeing myself. I let out a long, ragged breath, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I drove around aimlessly for a while, watched the skyline fade into suburbs, then reappear as I looped back toward the city. The day had turned to dusk. Streetlights flickered on. I remembered the night I first met Sarah in a crowded bar near the university campus. She was warm, funny, had an easy laugh. I remembered the day we married. Her eyes shining with promise, my heart so full. Remembered the moment I held our son in my arms for the first time, so small and fragile, as if the entire universe rested on his tiny chest. All that was real, it was beautiful, but now it felt like it belonged to another life. Eventually, I found myself at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I paid for a room in cash, asked for no extra services. The desk clerk gave me a bored glance, sliding the keycard across the counter. Room 206. I walked up the creaky stairs, my footsteps echoing in the near-deserted corridor. Inside, the room smelled faintly of bleach and stale air conditioning. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners. The faucet in the bathroom dripped occasionally, creating that same damned soundtrack I'd grown used to. Drip, drip, drip. I half laughed at the cruelty of that coincidence. Then I tossed my bag on the bed, sat down on the edge, and let my head fall into my hands. That's when the tears came, finally, silently. My shoulders shook, but I barely made a sound. I pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes, trying to stem the flow, but it was a lost cause. Months of tension, heartbreak, and humiliations came pouring out in those silent sobs. I cried for my son, who had to witness the unraveling of his parents' marriage. I cried for the man I'd been, for the illusions I'd had. And yes, I cried even for Sarah, for the loss of whatever we once were, for the broken pieces we'd never be able to put back together. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually my breathing steadied. I rose, splashed water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Shadows under the eyes, the first hints of gray at the temples. This was the face of a man who'd been stretched thin by heartbreak. I thought about the documents I'd dropped on Kevin's desk. I thought about the confusion, and maybe even panic in his eyes. Good, let him feel some of that. Let him sweat. For me, that was enough. Not vengeance in the sense of destroying him, but vengeance in the sense of reclaiming my own freedom. I'd walked away from the wreckage. Now they could deal with the aftermath. Looking back, maybe I was too hasty in giving up my share of the property, my home. But the truth was, it wasn't a home to me anymore. It was just a place of ghosts. A place where I'd seen my wife and another man in an intimate tangle. A place where my son had confessed, without knowing any better, that he saw me as the breadwinner dad and someone else as the cool dad. A place of lost illusions. I let out a shaky sigh and turned out the bathroom light. I tumbled into the motel bed, fully clothed, and stared once more at a new ceiling. The same feeling of emptiness washed over me, but I also felt a flicker of relief. No more pretending, no more quiet dinners where everything was a lie. No more waking in the night to find Sarah wasn't beside me. At some point, exhaustion took me. When I woke, the sun was filtering through the worn curtains. I was stiff, my back ached, but I was alive and free in some small, painful sense. I needed coffee. Hell, I needed a life plan. But coffee would do for now. I drove to a diner nearby, one of those old-school places with red vinyl booths, and a waitress who calls you honey. I slid into a booth, ordered black coffee and eggs. My phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls from Sarah, a few voicemails from my boss, and a text from my mother, who apparently caught wind that something was wrong. I sipped my coffee, ignoring it all. When the waitress brought my plate, she gave me a warm, sympathetic smile. For a moment, I wondered if my misery was that obvious. Probably was. I played with my fork, took a bite of eggs, but couldn't taste much. My mind drifted. Asterisk, how do I explain this to my parents? What do I tell my son? Asterisk, the thought of him made my chest tighten. I could see his bright eyes, asking me a million questions I didn't have answers for. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to disappear from his life. I just needed to figure out how to remain his father without losing myself to bitterness and regret. I finished maybe half the meal, left some bills on the table, and stepped outside. The fresh air felt good on my face. The day was bright, the sky a clear, pale blue. Unseasonably sunny for Seattle. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my mother's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Honey, is everything okay?" Sarah called. She sounded upset. Her voice was soft, concerned. "Mom," I said, my own voice cracking a bit. "No, not really." Things fell apart. I left. I heard her inhale sharply. "Oh, Mark, do you want to come stay with us in Florida for a while? Your father and I." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Mom. Thanks, but I need to figure this out here. I can't run away from it." She hesitated. "Okay. If you change your mind, we'll help you in any way we can." I thanked her and ended the call, feeling a pang of guilt that I couldn't muster more of a conversation. But I wasn't ready for the barrage of questions. Asterisk, what happened? Why? Are you sure there's no reconciliation? Asterisk, all the well-intentioned talk that wouldn't change a damn thing. I decided to drive downtown, to the waterfront. There's a long stretch of boardwalk, often packed with tourists, but on weekdays it's quieter. My mind needed the calm of the ocean's horizon. I found a parking spot, walked along the railing, the salty breeze ruffling my hair. Memories of taking my son here flooded back, eating cotton candy, riding the Ferris wheel, him laughing so hard he nearly got the hiccups. That memory made my eyes sting. Somewhere in those recollections, I felt a tug of resolve. Asterisk, I'm not going to vanish on him. Asterisk, I repeated it to myself like a mantra. No matter how this divorce or separation or whatever it was turned out, I'd be part of his life. And I'd do it with dignity. Because if there was one thing I refused to be, it was the father who abandoned his kid in bitterness. As I walked, I caught my reflection in a store window. Tall, slightly stooped, as though the weight of the last months had physically bent me. My hair looked a bit more disheveled than usual. My tie was loose, my eyes hollow. Pathetic, I muttered to myself. Then I clenched my jaw and stood straighter. This wasn't over. Maybe the marriage was, but my life wasn't. When I got back in the car, I finally decided to listen to one of Sarah's voice messages. Her voice was shaky. Mark, I'm sorry, I really am. Kevin doesn't mean anything. I swear I just got caught up. Please talk to me. We can fix this. I love you. A wave of anger flared. She'd already proven how easy it was to break trust. Yet she sounded so desperate, as if Kevin was just a passing fancy. My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. Asterisk, where was this remorse 2 months ago, Sarah? Asterisk, I thought bitterly. Asterisk, where was this guilt when you were sneaking around? Asterisk, I flicked the phone off, started the engine, and took a deep breath. That day, I called a lawyer recommended by a colleague. Set an appointment. If I was going to get out of this, I wanted it done properly, with as little chaos as possible. The lawyer's assistant gave me a time slot a week from then. I felt a mix of relief and dread. This was real. I was divorcing my wife, the mother of my child, the woman I still, despite everything, felt an ache of love for somewhere in my battered heart. The next day, I texted Sarah. Asterisk, we need to discuss our son's routine. I want him on weekends at least. Asterisk, she replied almost instantly. Asterisk, of course. Can we meet? Asterisk, we arranged to meet at a small cafe near the school, neutral ground. She arrived first, wearing a coat I'd bought her one Christmas. It stung to see her in it. I sat down across from her, noticing the faint dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she'd slept even less than me. She started to speak, but I cut in. I'm not here to rehash it all, Sarah. I just want to figure out a schedule for him that makes sense. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and she nodded. Okay. We talked about drop-off times, weekends, how to handle his soccer practice. My voice stayed measured, calm. She tried a few times to steer the conversation back to us, to apologize, to ask if there was any chance, but I shut her down gently each time. In my mind, the image of them on the couch was burned too vividly to ever be undone. Finally, I stood to leave. She reached for my hand, and I pulled away, not in anger but in finality. Her face fell. I'm sorry, she whispered. I inhaled, let it out slowly. I know, I said, and turned toward the door. Outside, I paused, glancing back through the glass. She was hunched over the table, covering her face with her hands. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to go back in, console her. But something stronger in me said no. I walked away. Time became strangely elastic in the weeks that followed. Lawyer consultations, meeting after meeting, sorting out the official dissolution. We agreed to mediation, skipping the uglier litigation for our son's sake. Kevin apparently tried to sign some transfer papers. I had to clarify with my lawyer that I was giving up the house, but not my paternal rights. There was confusion, phone calls, frustration. At times, I thought I'd drown in the bureaucracy. But ironically, dealing with finances was the one area I excelled in. That part was almost easy, overshadowed by the emotional toll. Sarah tried to talk to me again, a few times, begged me to consider counseling. Kevin even attempted to corner me in a hallway once, some lame attempt to say, "Man, this wasn't personal." I practically laughed in his face. It was my marriage, I told him. How is that not personal? He had no answer to that. Even my son asked fewer questions than I'd expected, almost as if some part of him understood that this rift was beyond his control. I assured him repeatedly that I loved him, that I'd always be there for him. We spent weekends together, movies, mini-golf, just small father-son rituals. He was quiet about Sarah, and I didn't push him to talk. He still asked occasionally if Kevin was going to live with them. I never knew what to say, so I just shrug and deflect. That was between Kevin and Sarah, not me. The day of the final settlement arrived with little fanfare. I signed documents that let me walk away from the house, from the mortgage, from the illusions I'd clung to. I secured my visitation rights. Enough money from my savings would help keep them stable until Sarah sorted out her own finances. I wanted no illusions that this was me being generous. It was simply the price of my own freedom. After that, we parted ways. I found a modest apartment on the other side of town. Cheap furniture, minimal decoration. It lacked the comfort of home, but it was mine. No ghosts, no bitter memories seeping out of the walls. I scrounged up an old kettle from a thrift store, just a regular one, something to make coffee or tea. And each morning, as I listened to its short hiss, I smiled wryly. Asterisk, this is my life now. Asterisk, my son visits every other weekend. We watch old comedy shows, order pizza, sometimes do an impromptu father-son project, like building model cars or painting a poster. He's not the same carefree kid he was a year ago, but he's adapting. And I see glimpses of his old bright spirit returning. That's all I could ask for, that he grows up knowing, no matter what, I'm still there. Sarah and I only speak when necessary. Logistics, scheduling. We keep it civil for our son's sake. She once asked me if I'd truly forgiven her. I told her forgiveness wasn't the right word. I'd accepted it. That was all. Because if I clung to anger, it would keep me chained to a marriage that no longer existed. I needed to be free. So in my own way, I let go. As for Kevin, I hear he's still in the picture, though it's complicated. I don't ask for details. I don't want them. Occasionally, I'll see them at a school function, him standing with his confident posture, Sarah at his side, my son in front of them. It still stings a bit, but I remind myself, asterisk, I made my choice. Asterisk, no matter what they do, I'm not part of that equation anymore. Some nights, I still lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. The memory of that couch scene flashes through my mind like a horror reel. But the difference now is that the kettle in my apartment doesn't scream for half an hour. It's calm. It whistles once and stops. My thoughts, too, I keep from boiling over. Because I understand that revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about releasing me. And in that sense, I've already succeeded. It's funny how life can break you down to your rawest core, and then, in the aftermath, give you a chance to rebuild. I'm not the same man I was, but I'm not entirely broken either. I have my job, my sense of dignity, and my boy. And if I'm the dad who buys food more than the cool dad, that's okay. I'll be there for him. That's what matters. Sometimes, as I drift off to sleep, I recall the sound of that dripping faucet the night I left home. Drip, drip, drip. It punctuated the end of a chapter in my life. Now, all I have is the quiet hiss of normal life. And in that quiet, I find that I can finally breathe. I like the silence. It reminds me I'm free.